Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Always exciting to dig into some new material.
And today we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, this one is a bit of a throwback.
OSHA record keeping.
But we're going all the way back to 2001.
Back when things were a little bit different.
Think of it like a safety archaeology.
I love that safety archaeology.
We're going to be dusting off some old regulations.
Seeing how they still matter, even in 2025.
Because believe me, they do.
For our listeners out there who might be newer to safety,
or maybe just need a refresher.
We're talking about OSHA forms.
Specifically the ones from back in 2001.
Like the OSHA 200 and 101.
Those were the predecessors to our modern 300 and 301.
And even though they've been updated,
understanding these old forms
and the rules around them
is still so important.
Now for this deep dive, we've got two main sources.
First up, an excerpt from the OSHA website.
Specifically, Regulation 1904.44.
Catchy title.
Retention and updating of old forms.
You know, straight to the point.
And then we've got a transcript.
From a Safety One Source YouTube video.
All about summarizing and posting 2001 data.
Which falls under Regulation 1904.43.
We'll link to both of those in the show notes.
So you can check them out for yourselves.
All right, let's jump right in.
Starting with that OSHA website excerpt.
So this regulation is all about how long companies
have to keep those old OSHA forms.
And what's wild is they were and still are required
to keep those 200 and 101 forms.
For a full 5 years after the year they apply to.
So for those 2001 records, we're talking 2006 at least.
Now, 5 years of records.
I can only imagine what some companies' storage rooms must look like.
But seriously, you've got me thinking.
What kind of insights could you actually pull from all that historical data? Imagine you're a safety manager.
At a company that's been around for decades.
You could go back and look at those old forms and see.
For example, if a particular department
or type of job
has consistently had higher injury rates.
Or maybe you notice a spike in certain types of injuries.
During specific months of the year.
That's like having a window into the company's safety past.
And that kind of information can be so valuable.
For developing those targeted interventions.
Making informed decisions about resource allocation.
And really building a proactive safety culture.
Based on hard data.
It's not just about compliance.
It's about using those records as a tool for continuous improvement.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see why this deep dive is so important.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to our next source.
That Safety One Source YouTube video transcript.
Which focuses on how companies had to summarize.
And post their 2001 data.
Okay, I'm all ears. What did this video highlight?
Well, imagine it's early 2002.
You're a safety manager.
And you have this new requirement.
You need to create a summary of all the data.
From your 2001 OSHA 200 log.
And post it publicly for your employees to see.
Transparency was key back then.
Wow, a public posting, that's a pretty big deal.
It was a big step towards making safety everyone's responsibility.
What all had to go on this summary?
Well, it had to include the total number of cases.
From each category on the OSHA 200 log.
The calendar year covered 2001 in this case.
Of course.
The company's name and address.
Okay.
The establishment's name and address.
Got it.
And it had to be signed and dated.
By someone with the authority to certify the accuracy of the information.
Couldn't just have anyone signing off on this.
So pretty detailed stuff, and they couldn't just tuck this summary away.
In some obscure corner, could they?
Nope. It had to be posted in a conspicuous place.
Where all employees could easily see it.
And there were strict rules against altering.
Or covering up any of the information.
OSHA wanted to make sure this data was front and center.
Absolutely. It was about accountability and transparency.
I'm starting to understand why this is also fascinating.
Even though we're talking about 2001,
these regulations touch on so many core principles.
Are still relevant today.
Data collection transparency, accountability.
You're exactly right.
And here's where things get even more interesting.
Oh, I love where this is going. Tell me more. Think about this. Posting that summary wasn't just about checking a box for OSHA. It was about making a statement to employees. About safety being a priority. It told them, we're tracking these incidents, we're being transparent about our record, and we want you to be informed.
You know, you're right. It's easy to get lost in the details of regulations and forms, but this really highlights the human element of safety.
Absolutely. It shifts the focus from simply reacting to incidents to actively trying to prevent them. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels responsible for safety.
And that public posting, it probably sparked some important conversations too. I can imagine employees seeing that information and starting to think more critically about their own work practices, potential hazards, and the overall safety of their workplace.
Precisely, it's about empowering employees, encouraging them to speak up about concerns, and creating a dialogue around safety that goes beyond just following rules.
So even though this regulation might seem like a relic from the past, it really laid the groundwork for a lot of the principles we value in safety today. Transparency, employee engagement, proactive risk management.
It's all connected. It's fascinating to see how those early steps toward accountability and open communication have influenced the evolution of safety practices.
I'm starting to wonder if we could even draw a line from those 2001 requirements to the sophisticated safety management systems many companies use today.
I think you're onto something. Those systems are all about collecting data, analyzing trends, identifying areas for improvement, and engaging employees in the process. And in a way, those early OSHA regulations were pushing companies in that direction, even if they didn't realize it at the time.
It's like they were planting the seeds for a more data-driven, proactive approach to safety.
And those seeds have definitely grown. We've come a long way since 2001, but it's important to remember that the core principles haven't really changed.
So what does this all mean for our listeners today, especially those who might be thinking, my company wasn't even around in 2001, so why should I care?
That's a great question. Even if your company is relatively new, understanding these historical regulations can give you a deeper appreciation for how safety practices have evolved. It's like looking at the roots of a tree to understand how it grew so tall.
And it's a reminder that safety isn't just about following the latest rules. It's about building a culture of continuous improvement, learning from the past, and always striving to do better.
Exactly. Those older regulations might seem like ancient history, but they offer valuable lessons that can help us shape a safer future for our workplaces.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's take a moment to recap the key takeaways for our listeners. We started by diving into OSHA Regulation 1904.44, which highlights the requirement to retain those old OSHA 200 and 101 forms for 5 years after the year they apply to.
Right, and then we explored the Safety One source video transcript, which showed us how companies had to summarize their 2001 data and post it publicly for all employees to see.
And along the way, we uncovered some pretty amazing insights about how those seemingly outdated regulations actually influence the evolution of safety practices, emphasizing the importance of transparency, employee involvement, and data-driven decision-making.
It's been a truly enlightening journey back in time.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I do. I would encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on their own record-keeping practices. Are you treating those records as valuable sources of information? Are you using them to identify trends, analyze root causes, and drive continuous improvement?
That's a great point. Don't let those records gather dust in a forgotten file cabinet. They hold valuable insights that can help you create a safer and healthier workplace.
And remember, even if your company is relatively new, understanding the history of safety regulations can give you a deeper appreciation for the journey we've been on and the path we're headed toward.
Wonderful insights, as always. Thanks for joining us for this fascinating deep dive into the world of OSHA record-keeping history.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to geek out about safety with you.
You know, as we've been talking about these older regulations, it makes me think about how they really shifted the landscape of workplace safety.
Yeah, it's true. You know, back then, safety was often seen as kind of a box to be checked.
Right.
You know, not so much a continuous process.
Exactly. But these regulations from 2001 with their emphasis on record keeping and transparency, they were almost like a wake-up call.
Yeah, they forced companies to start paying closer attention to their safety data and to think about the bigger picture.
And I bet it wasn't always comfortable, you know, having to actually confront those numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
And potentially expose areas where they were falling short.
It could be uncomfortable, but that discomfort was necessary.
Yeah.
It was the first step toward real improvement.
It's like holding up a mirror.
Exactly.
To a company's safety culture and saying, okay, this is where we are now. Let's figure out how to get better.
And that's where the real power of those regulations lies. They weren't just about punishment or compliance. They were about creating a framework for positive change.
It's amazing to think that those early steps towards accountability and data-driven decision-making have had such a lasting impact on the field of safety.
It's a testament to the fact that even small changes can have a ripple effect over time.
Well, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of OSHA record-keeping history.
It has been a journey.
It's been a fascinating journey filled with surprising insights.
I've really enjoyed exploring this with you.
Me too. It's amazing how much we can learn from the past.
Right.
Before we sign off, any final words of wisdom for our listeners out there?
Absolutely. Embrace the power of data. Don't let those records just collect dust. Use them to analyze trends, identify hazards, and drive continuous improvement in your workplace.
And never underestimate the importance of transparency. Open communication and employee involvement are so crucial for building a strong safety culture.
Remember, safety is a journey, not a destination. We're all in this together, constantly learning and striving to create a safer and healthier future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this insightful deep dive. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to those OSHA regulations and that Safety One Source video we discussed.
And until next time, stay safe out there.
That's a wrap. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a brand new topic. We can't wait to explore it with you.